So let me guess, you can play your pentatonic scale up and down really fast. You can play patterns, you can bend strings, you can do hammer-ons and pull-offs, all of that stuff. But for some reason, as soon as you try and put it together in a guitar solo, it just doesn't sound right. I totally understand how you feel, and I've been there myself. Over the years teaching hundreds of guitar students, I've learned a few things that'll really help you find your voice. Before I get into it, I do want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel. And while you're at it, go check out the Near Life Experience Patreon community. So what I find is that soloing is a feel thing. One day you just kind of got it, but how do you get it? Here are the two things that I've found really pay dividends with my students. The first one is building a lick vocabulary. That means stealing licks. That's right. You want to learn your favorite guitar player's solos, and not just the solo in its entirety. I want you to break down the solo into individual licks and then tweak those licks. Learn them really well and make them your own. The other thing people don't realize is that they should really focus on one song. You'd be shocked to know this, but if you get really good at soloing over one song, it'll pay dividends across the board. Now, it just so happens that we're going to kill two birds with one stone by studying one of the greatest guitar solos, David Gilmour's outro solo on Comfortably Numb by Pink Floyd. I'm going to teach you a little exercise to play over those chord changes, and then I'm going to teach you 5 licks from the guitar solo and give you some advice on how to tweak them. And last, I'm going to show you a little example of me improvising over those changes. Borrowing from what David Gilmour did, but tweaking it and making it my own. Now, all of the licks are going to come from about the first 45 seconds of the guitar solo. So let's give you a little frame of reference by showing you the section of the solo we'll be drawing from. Now here are the scales you're going to be using to solo over this chord progression. We're going to do B minor pentatonic that starts at the 7th fret. We're also going to do what I call the extended pentatonic scale, which is sort of an up and across scale where basically all you need to use is your 1st and 3rd finger. You go down from the 7th fret to the 5th fret on the 6th string to start it and go like this. Gilmour uses those different positions we went into several times in his solo. And then finally, we're going to use the blues scale, which just adds one extra note to your pentatonic scale, like this. All right, now that that's out of the way, let's start with an exercise that I think is absolutely invaluable to practice over any set of chord changes that you're trying to play lead on. I call it quarter notes, 8th notes, triplets, and 16th notes. Of course, in this case, we're going to be doing quarter notes, 8th notes, triplets, 16th notes, sextuplets, and 32nd notes, for those of you who can really fly through your scales. The goal, of course, is to play them one after another during this exercise, which will help you really get the hang of adding different rhythms into your guitar solos. By the way, the backing track I'm using I've linked in the description below, so I suggest you go to that video and use that when you practice. Okay, now that you've gotten warmed up on that exercise, it's time for the fun part. Here's lick number 1 from the Comfortably Numb outro solo. You're going to slide up to the 11th fret of the 3rd string, and then you're going to go to the 10th fret of the 2nd string, then back to the 11th fret of the 3rd string, and then back to the 10th fret of the 2nd string. And then you're going to go to the 12th fret of the 2nd string, pick it, then bend a full step and a half bend. You got to hit that note with it. Then you release it. Then you go 12, pull off to 10, and then 12, all on the 2nd string, and then 1st string 10th fret. One of the reasons why I picked this particular lick is that I like the way it forces you to travel from your normal pentatonic up into the 2nd position. The other thing is that this is a nice little position to play with. It's really fertile ground for some cool soloing ideas. So you can just really focus on the concept of big bends and being in this position when you tweak it around. Here's lick number 2. This one's pretty simple. So you start on the 10th fret of the 2nd string, then you go to the 7th fret of the 2nd string, and then you go to the 9th fret of the 3rd string. Then you back up to the 7th fret of the 2nd string, then the 9th fret of the 3rd string again, and then the 7th fret of the 3rd string, and then you end it by going to the 9th fret of the 4th string. I like this lick because it uses what I call the 3 pattern. You see, you're playing descending notes of the pentatonic scale in blocks of 3 like this. 1, 2, 3, and then you back up 1, 1, 2, 3, and then of course he does an extra 4th note at the end, but the pattern is there. And an exercise I have all of my guitar students do is what I call the continuous 3 pattern exercise, where we play over a chord progression only using the 3 pattern, kind of going up and down, but not necessarily all the way up and all the way down, but changing directions at different spots on the guitar neck, like this. Another exercise you can do is to build a solo out of only 3 pattern concepts, something like this. So those are different ways you can play around with tweaking and expanding that very simple lick I just showed you. Lick number 3 is what I consider to be David Gilmour's quintessential comfortably numb outro guitar lick. He likes it so much he goes back to it or variations of it like 4 or 5 times in the guitar solo. It goes like this. You start with the classic blues lick that goes like this. So you're bending the 9th fret of the 3rd string a full step, and then you're playing the 7th fret of the 2nd and 1st string in succession. Then you're going to do a little pull off on the 2nd string, 10 to 7. And then you're going to go back to the 3rd string, 9th fret, and straight into a full step bend. And then pick it again at the apex and release it, and then pull it off to 7th fret. And then you're going to go to the 9th fret of the 4th string, and then mash your 3rd finger down on the 3rd string right at that 9th fret and play that string. And then you go to the 7th fret of the 3rd string. And then you're going to go 9, 7 on the 4th string. And then here's where the blues scale comes in. 9, 8, 7 on the 5th string. Then slide down to the 5th fret on the 5th string. This brings you into the extended pentatonic scale on the lower end. And then go to the 7th fret of the 6th string. And then the 5th fret of the 5th string again, to end the phrase. Of course, this has endless possibilities for tweakage. Did I just make up that word? Anyway, start with that classic blues riff. Now, you're using sextuplets on this phrase, so it goes by pretty quick. Adding your 3 pattern after that blues lick is a good way to go. And then playing around with adding those blues scale notes and sliding into the extended lower end. Lots of concepts that this one phrase brings up that you can play around with when it comes to tweaking. So have fun with that one and really go for it. I suggest you come up with at least 5 variations of the phrase. Lick number 4, or I should say phrase number 4, goes like this. Now, I picked this phrase because even though it uses the same blues lick as the last one, it uses it with 16th notes instead of sextuplets. And I know it's kind of easy when you're playing that blues lick to immediately go into a triplet rhythm. So 16th notes is a really cool way to change up playing this blues lick. And then the other thing I like is this little finger jump that he does. So you could play around with that. So once again, make a bunch of different versions of this lick. Tweak it, come up with your own ideas. And now let's move on to lick number 5, the last one. This one is very simple. It just goes like this. What I'm doing here is I'm starting with a rake, and then I press the 7th fret of the 2nd and 3rd string, and then I press the 9th fret of the 4th string. Why such a simple lick? Well, I want you to be reminded about double stops and how you can have a lot of fun with them when you're soloing. I mean, you can make up whole sections of solos that are just double stops. The other thing that this lick reminds me of is the concept of raking strings and then voicing certain notes. Stevie Ray Vaughan made a living out of that. So now that you've taken all of these licks and learned them really well and tweaked them and used them to come up with your own ideas, you're going to want to just practice soloing on that chord progression over and over and over again till you start to sound good. And don't be afraid to focus on just one of the phrases and just play around with that one over and over again. Don't think of practicing soloing as always having to try and create a great sounding solo. It's good to try different exercises like taking one specific lick or phrase and expanding on that during the solo, using the 3 pattern to create soloing ideas and just sticking to that for a while. And then when it's time to play with a band or make a recording or whatever, that's when you start putting it all together. Speaking of putting it all together, here's a little improvised guitar solo that I put over the changes of the last part of Comfortably Numb.